Good evening. I'm Ellen Myers, the Programs and Communications Director for the Newton Free Library. Thanks for tuning in for this Take and Make program on learning modern calligraphy with Debbie Reelitz. We hope you'll join the Newton Free Library community by visiting us either in person or online. We have a wealth of virtual programs and services for people of all ages, and our website is newtonfreelibrary.net. Please note that closed captioning is enabled for this session. You can turn it off or back on by clicking the live CC transcript link at the bottom of your screen. Also, please note this session is being recorded. We'll be taking questions via the chat feature, and I ask that you listen carefully. If you have a technical question, please chat to Janelle. If you have a question for our speaker, Debbie, please chat to me, Ellen Myers. And please do not chat to Debbie, as she will be teaching the class and does not have the ability to monitor the chat. Also later on, I'll put in a link in the chat for those who want to sign up for one or more of the library's email newsletters. It's a great way to stay informed about everything we have going on for you at the Newton Free Library. Debbie Reelitz has been a professional calligrapher for 20 years. She creates custom calligraphic artwork with words, lyrics, and/or images that are meaningful to her clients. And now I'll turn the screen over to you, Debbie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me here tonight. It is just a real pleasure to be with all of you. In this technology age, to have other people join me in doing the lettering is always a real treat and a real pleasure, because I was lucky enough that way back in 5th grade, my teacher introduced me to calligraphy, and who knew where it would go, but I am incredibly grateful that, they were doing these Friday afternoon intramural programs, and for like 6 or 7 weeks when kids aren't paying attention anyway, right? So they were allowing kids to sign up and do interesting things. And there was a course on calligraphy. I think I did a macrame once and a calligraphy, and I think I did a soccer, and the calligraphy definitely stuck. And so not only did my 5th grade teacher be a huge influence on me, but the other major influence was my mother, because once I got introduced to calligraphy, she was like, here, we need these 4-H certificates done, or here, I've got this project for church where I need calligraphy, or I have this poem, would you write this poem? And I didn't realize it at the time, but all of those requests kept me going, because calligraphy is not the easiest art form. There's a reason why there's not, a ton of people doing it, is because it takes patience, practice, persistence, and then the last P is projects. And that's what I'm learning that my mom was doing for me, is that she gave me projects, and that gave me an excuse and a reason to practice. I'm actually coming to you from my studio in North Granby, Connecticut. This is pre-pandemic, where I would teach the calligraphy arts, and do commissions for clients and projects and events and all sorts of things that I've done over the years. And I think that's one of the things that's incredibly special about calligraphy, is that I think I'm going into my 24th year as a professional, and it's like an incredible honor to do calligraphy, because people invite you into their lives when they have something meaningful to say. They want to honor something special, to celebrate an important event, and to be invited into people's lives during something that is precious to them is incredibly humbling, but also an incredible privilege. And so you guys get to kind of walk into that experience tonight of not just watching the lettering, but doing the lettering yourself, because you'll be putting your own love and energy and, care into those letter forms. And my hope is that you'll share those letters with others, and they'll be able to experience and benefit from that love and care and time and, concentration that you put into the letters that you make tonight. So thank you for including me in your evening. I know there's always a zillion things where you could be, and yet thank you for choosing to be here tonight. So we're here specifically to learn about modern calligraphy. And so modern calligraphy, I want to talk a little bit about different tools that can be used to make modern calligraphy. And tonight we are going to be using, the Tombow brush marker. So it's a marker, but it has a pointed tip to it, and it's got some flexibility on it. It will, it's a good place to start, and it's a nice affordable pen, and it's great for simple, easy projects. Okay. Now, don't use your superpowers on this, because you don't want to press over hard on it, because it is only a marker. But modern calligraphy can also be done with just a good old pointed brush. So for those who enjoy, painting, you might already have a brush. It can be done with acrylic, and that's how this lettering on the back wall was done, was with a brush, something similar to this, and acrylic paints. Or if you have a palette, you can use a brush like this, a pointed brush, with a palette of gouache or watercolor. Sorry, gouache is one of those calligraphy things. Here's another pointed brush that also works very well. It holds water here if you like. That is a great resource for doing lettering on. And then this is also an incredibly powerful tool for doing modern calligraphy, and it's just the pencil. Because modern calligraphy can just be drawn. So if anybody out there does not have the brush marker tonight, you can still draw the letters, okay? And there's lots of things you can do with the drawn marker, or just with the drawn thing. And I just recently did a project. I was creating it for a show, a Granby Artist Art Show at Lost Acres Vineyard, which is right around the corner from me. And so this is done in a modern calligraphy style, but rather than do it with a brush or with a marker, it's been drawn and then painted in. And so it's just a fun example of where you can go with the modern calligraphy. Especially if I'm doing something for reproduction, it's really nice to be able to draw it and be able to fine tune it. Okay. And so what is it that makes something modern calligraphy? So I want to just introduce you to this is some practice on my wall behind me. I was really lucky during the pandemic and was commissioned by a church in Bethel, Connecticut. And so the church asked me to do some lettering in their vestibule, way up high around the edges. And so I did it with the brush that I was describing earlier. And I just want you to look carefully at the letters. What is it, what's happening with the letter strokes? And we have thicks and we have thins. We have the thick lines, and then we have the thin lines. And it's that contrast between the thicks and the thins that is kind of the most distinguishing component of modern calligraphy. Now, you're going to find there's a huge array of modern calligraphy out there, and it's everywhere. after the class tonight, you're going to walk around the world and you're going to be like, oh, that's modern calligraphy, or that's, so your awareness is probably going to be even higher than normal on it. But these are just some samples of things I've received in the mail. This is where it's got, cursive components, which is often typical of modern calligraphy, but the letters do not have to be connected. But there's thicks and then there's thins, okay? And you can see that the letters are not perfectly straight across.
Debbie, can you use a fountain pen? One of the students wants to know that.
Yeah, you'd probably use it as a way to draw it, because you won't necessarily get the pressure and release with the fountain pen. Okay, so I will try to touch on ways to draw it. Okay, so here we have a lot of holiday cards come in with modern calligraphy, and you can kind of see that there's the thin and then there's thick components. So that's really, again, very characteristic of it. Here's one more. I especially like this one. I also like the way the letters, I call them dancing, where they go, so here it's up, here it goes down. We've got the exit stroke has come down low before coming out. It just has a sense of energy to it, okay? Now, the thing I want to do, and bear with me on this one, I want to do a slight detour, okay? We have this class, we're having this workshop, and it's called Modern Calligraphy, but I want to show you a little treasure that I have. All right. Can you guys see what that says? It's got the word autograph on it. And I don't know about you guys, but when I was a little girl, I had an autograph book, and it was a lot simpler than this one. It did not have this beautiful embossed lettering on it. But I do think I took it to Disney, and I do think I've got a signature of Goofy in it, or, my teachers, probably my 5th grade teachers probably in that one, as well as my friends and things like that. But when a calligrapher retired, this was handed down to me, and I was blown away when I started looking at what was inside of it. Okay, I'm going to hold it up, and I'm going to just give you a minute to see if you can give it a chance to focus here. So this is a page in the autograph book, and it's the graduates of a business college in upstate New York. Okay, so these are graduates from a business college in upstate New York. All right. All right, can anybody find the date on there? So
I'll say it because everybody's muted. It says 1877, July something, 1877, I think.
yeah, absolutely. So the year is 1877. And I'm going to show you another page. And to me, it's like, why would people in business be trained to have beautiful lettering like this? It's one of those things where it's just like, why would they be spending their time trying to make, these gorgeous letters? And this whole book is filled with gorgeous drawings. They're just all really lovely. And if you notice, these letters have thicks and thins. It's got thicks and then thins, which is fundamentally what we are going to be doing in our modern calligraphy tonight. So just to keep in mind that even though we're doing a modern calligraphy and we're using a modern tool like a marker, these principles of lettering have been around for a very long time. So you're part of a beautiful tradition of lettering that we get to, continue that journey on it. All right. So I'm hoping that you guys have had a chance to get maybe you can, if you don't have the handouts, they are, the link to them is available on the chat. If you do not see it, you can ask for it to be reposted. Okay, excellent. All right, so Janelle just reposted that. So that way, just in case you need to still access those handouts, you can find them at that link. But what we're going to do now is get you guys doing it. Okay, so we're going to start off with just some blank paper. And I'm going to change my camera angle, so bear with me just a second. Okay. All right, so we talked about how the letters have thicks and thins to them, right? And so there's 3 kinds of strokes as we do our modern calligraphy. And I'm going to, we're going to focus on, we're going to take them step by step. We're not going to try to do all 3 of them at the same time. So on the modern calligraphy, we have thins, we have thicks, and then the third one, which is harder, is the taper. Okay, so we're going to break it down and first start off simple by just doing thins and thicks. I know that might sound super simple right now, and hopefully that's the case. But I want to just talk a little bit about what it looks like to do the thick stroke. Okay, so we'll start off there. I am a right-handed calligrapher. So my demonstrating is going to be with my right hand. I will try to, for those lefties out there, I'm going to do quick comments to help guide with that. And if you have additional questions about that, please throw them in the chat. Okay. So you can see that I'm holding my pen, my marker, to this left side of the paper. And I'm going to press on it very deliberately. My hand slides down the page and lifts up very deliberately. If I try to do it really fast, I'm not going to get an even stroke. So the first thing that we want to do when we do a full pressure stroke is learn how to get an even stroke. Be deliberate with the start, slide your hand down, and then lift up. Okay. Now, if you're lefty, you're going to want to do the same thing, just opposite. Your point is going to be the right side. I'm going to deliberately push down with the pen, slide, and then lift up. Okay. So then the other stroke is to do the no pressure stroke, or sometimes I call it the float stroke, where I am literally trying to be as light on the paper as I possibly can. If you can see, I am so light that there are some times where the pen skips. And that's totally okay, because when we are trying to develop that lightness of touch, we want, it's better to be too light than to have too much pressure. So what I want you guys all to do is with your your first piece of paper or a scrap piece of paper. I'm a huge fan of grabbing scrap paper out of the recycling bin. I want you to try just doing a few full pressure strokes and then no pressure strokes, okay? And just allow yourself to really move your whole arm. I am actually pivoting from my shoulder. If you'll notice, my fingers are not twitching, my wrist is not twitching, my elbow is not kicking out. I'm literally, the main area where I'm moving from is my shoulder. Okay, so give that a go. Do some full pressure strokes and some no pressure strokes. All right, and I realize this might sound silly, but be sure to be breathing. Because one of the things is that when we're trying something new and we're concentrating really hard, sometimes, at least my tendency is to hold my breath. So I'm going to put that out there just in case there's somebody else who might be concentrating so hard that they're holding their breath. All right, we'll just do that for a few more seconds. And make sure as you do those full pressure strokes, you know, your whole hand slides down the page. I'm not moving my fingers, I'm not moving my wrist, I'm just allowing my hand to slide down the page. Okay, awesome. Okay, so one of the handouts is a set of guidelines. Okay, another one is our capital letters. Okay, now these letters are designed to just help us get comfortable with the marker. Okay, they're just there to help us get comfortable with combining the thicks and the thins. Okay, because until we get comfortable with the thicks and the thins, you know, it's going to be hard to let me try zooming out a little bit so that way you can see more of the letters. Now, you can work on your guidelines if you like for the capitals. You can work in this, the larger space right here. Okay, the lowercase letters will end up going in what's called the X height or the X area there. Okay, the other thing you can do if you want to not write on your guidelines is you can put a blank piece of paper over the guidelines and work that way. That's another way to work in practice. Okay, I'm going to choose that method so that way the guidelines aren't too much of a distraction, but you can kind of see what we're doing. Now you'll notice this alphabet is all out of order. In the calligraphy world, we call a sheet that has all the letters of the alphabet on it in a certain lettering style is called an exemplar, an example. Okay, so this is an exemplar of this simplified modern calligraphy style. Okay, and you'll also notice that they've been grouped. The letters have been put together so that way similar letters are together. This first batch is straight strokes, full pressure strokes, and thin strokes. Starting with the K, we're moving into some diagonals. Here we've got our letters that have counters. This area here, where it's trapped in space is called a counter. Okay. Then we have diagonal letters. And then at the very end, we're going to do a little bit of tapering. Remember, we talked about the 3 pen strokes. We had the full pressure stroke, the no pressure stroke, and then the taper stroke. Okay. So what I want you to do is work on I through Y right now. I'm going to do a quick demo because there are going to be some slight variations on how to hold the pen. Okay. This first set of letters is fairly straightforward. The I through the F is a combination of full pressure strokes and floating strokes. The K for the diagonal, we're just simply allowing ourselves to put the diagonal in with a thin. And now that I just did a curly Q, one of the temptations is with calligraphy is to always add maybe a few too many loops, which I might be guilty of tonight. So forgive me if I go in that direction. Again, these letters are just designed to help us shift. We're going from working on the side of the brush. Now that I'm doing a thin, I'm changing my pen hold and I'm coming up to the tip of the brush. Okay, so I have to get used to constantly shifting how I'm holding the lettering tool. Now, one of the things I would like to take a moment on is that there's not a lot of attention being paid to how to hold a pen nowadays. And I just want to reinforce the importance of just having one boss on your writing instrument. Oftentimes nowadays, I'll see people holding pens like this or deep in their fist. You know, I will see just about everything. But the problem with holding pens like this is that I've got 3 bosses. And for all of you out there in the working world, we all kind of know that one boss is more than enough, right? So I want to reduce it so that way I only need to develop the fine motor skills of one boss. Okay, so I've got my pointing finger, and it's not quite, but it's almost opposite my thumb, and it's my pointer that is doing all the work. The thumb is just the fulcrum. That's my pivot point. Now, I do use my middle finger just as a rest, okay? But by doing this, I don't have so many muscles on the pen that it's hard to control what I'm doing. If I hold it deep into my hand like this, I'm using my the large muscles down here, which are not going to have your fine motor controls the way your fingertip does. So by working with just your fingertip, you're going to develop those fine motor control muscles that are at your at the end of your fingers. Okay. So on the A and the Z, actually, you know what? Let's pause for just a second and let's have you guys work with I through D. Go through and do each letter once, maybe twice. Don't do more than any letter twice. That's a recipe for boredom. Plus, oftentimes what I find is that, you know, once you've done something more than twice, your best one is probably going to be your first or second attempt. Usually A lot of repetition on a letter does not necessarily help you. So while people are lettering, I'm just going to briefly talk to those who might be working with a pen or a pencil. So basically the concept is that on the downstrokes, we have a thick. And then so we can draw these letters, and this will be, you'll see this much more when we get to the lowercase letters, but everywhere there's a full pressure stroke, you're just creating, a little rectangle. And with a pencil, you can start playing with, different combinations of what you can do for those thins. Okay. All right, if you've gotten all the way through your I through your D, just make mini words out of the letters that you have. It's your little bit of Scrabble for the day. So if I've done I through D, I can write the word hide or kid or bird. And if you want, you can play a little bit with sizing. If you don't want to make everything the same size, that's okay. Everything doesn't even need to be perfectly straight up and down. That's the fun part about the modern calligraphy, is that I can alter things. Each letter is an independent choice. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some of these diagonal letters. On the A and the Z, if you notice here on the sheet, there's a little note that says point pen to the upper left. Okay. Because we're working on the diagonal, if I hold my pen straight across, I'm going to end up having a hard time getting a full pressure stroke that matches the full pressure strokes of up here. Okay, so I want to point my pen towards that upper left and make my diagonal stroke. Again, I want to be deliberate. Now, for those who are lefty, I'm going to go in the other direction. Let's see here. Hold on. So as a right-handed person, I'm pointing to my upper left. As a left-handed person, I'm going to point to my lower right. And apply that pressure. Okay. And I'm going to do that same thing with my letter Z. I'm pointing to the upper left. And then, so let's look at the rest of the diagonals. So we've got the letter V. Here, the diagonal goes from left to right. So now my pen is pointing down towards the lower left corner. So I've got my lower left corner. And then for the left hand, it's going to be to the upper right. So it's going the opposite direction on the page. And again, these letters are designed to just be super simple and to be able to just develop getting comfortable with this tool that you're using. This is a skill building alphabet. Okay. All right, so now we've touched on all the letters from I to Y. So what I'd like to see you do is we'll just spend a couple minutes and I want you to make words with the letters that use the alphabet between these letters between I and Y. Okay. So make words with those letter combinations. You'll notice that some of these I'm doing some variations on the letters. Hopefully you're working on your own letters. But know that these are just there as a template to get you started. And the other thing as you go through and do this, you might be thinking, oh, there's not much consistency, or I'm having difficulty making the letters, the thickness that the lines, the thickness that I want. You know, the thing to keep in mind is that the beauty of calligraphy is that it does have variation. You know, we live in a computer world where the fonts that we are using are sliced and diced and perfectly spaced and, you know, made to just have all the life sucked out of them. So that way they can be uniform and predictable on the computer. And so one of the things to keep in mind as we letter tonight is that we don't have to put those kind of expectations on ourselves.
we can allow our letters to have variation and to celebrate that, because that is what makes it unique and special. And somebody who is lucky enough to receive your lettering knows that you didn't just hit print on a computer, but that you actually took the time to make something for them. Okay, and that makes the lettering that you're doing very, very special. All right, I want to make sure we're going to do the we're going to touch on that third skill, right? So we've been talking about the first two skills of full pressure strokes and no pressure strokes or floating strokes. So now we're going to add that third stroke, which is the taper stroke. Okay. So on the taper stroke, I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit, and let me see if I can get a little bit closer. So on the taper stroke, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be applying pressure and then gradually releasing that pressure. Okay, so I'm going to apply pressure and then release it. Or I might start with a thin and then add pressure to it. We're going to see both of those. Now, just remember, this is a marker. There's only going to be so precise it's going to work. Okay, so be patient with it and realize that this is a starter tool. Okay, it's not going to be one where you're going to get incredibly precise lettering. This is a tool where you're going to get fun lettering to go with it. Okay, so how do we apply those tapers? We're going to full pressure, and then down here for the U, I'm going to taper up into a thin. So what I did is I went from being side to up on the tip of my brush. And you're going to get these ragged edges. You know, that's normal, okay? So I'm going to release on the pressure. I'm going to actually, I like to stop and then literally change my pen to where I have more control with my point. And then I went to the side and I did my full pressure. Okay, so for J, I'm going to full pressure. I'm going to gradually release it. When I get to my thin, I like to go up on the tip and then add the curl on the J and the top on the J. You know, and the beauty of it being a marker is that if you want to, if that ragged edges bothers you, color it in. You know, that's the beauty of it, is that we can go back in and vary it. Okay, so now we've got, so the U and the J get us started with the taper. Now we have curved tapers with the letter S and C. Okay. All right, so now you can see that there's a suggestion of pointing the pen to the upper left side. So that means if you're left-handed, you want to point down to the lower right corner. Okay. And for the S, we're going to start on the side. I'm going to taper into the thin. I like to pick up because I like to have control over my thin. And then here's where we go from thin, and I'm gradually adding pressure. And then I kind of push up into the end of it. And then if you like, you can add a little mark on your S. I'll do that again a little more real time. Sometimes going slow makes, too slow makes it a little harder to get a smooth stroke. That said, by working slowly now, you actually are learning the muscle memory faster. Okay, so it's okay to be patient and to work nice and slowly, because the slower you go, the faster you're actually learning. So we're doing full pressure, taper, and then I'm going to do the crossbar on the E, the G, the O, full pressure, taper. And then I can turn that O into a Q. In this case, I'm changing my pen to that lower left corner and adding a taper stroke. No pressure, taper, full pressure, taper, no pressure. So there's a lot that's happening in that very short area of the taper of the Q. So give those tapered letters a try. Okay, so try the U through the Q. And then write in some words with those letters. Now that you've got the whole alphabet, there's no restrictions. All right, we're gonna move into, we're actually going to do a project with all those caps that we just learned. Don't worry, we are still gonna get to the lowercase tonight. But does anybody out there know what a pangram is? All right, let me ask a different question. I know you guys are all on mute, so I realize it's not fair for me to ask questions. But does anyone remember the phrase, the quick it's not a phrase, it's a sentence. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. You're probably maybe having a flashback to first grade or kindergarten, where a pangram is the entire alphabet in a single sentence. Okay. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do a pangram with these letter shapes that we've been learning. Okay, so we've got the whole alphabet. So we're going to go through and make sure that we touch all the letters of the alphabet. My favorite is the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And let me see here. Let me first, so I've started with a blank new piece of paper and I created a border on one side. If you like, you can add a border at the top of your paper. It's almost like it's kind of some fence posts. We've got our full pressure stroke. And then we've got our no pressure strokes kind of floating their way across the top of the page. Okay. And now I'm going to write the quick brown fox. Okay. And that way I know I will have touched all the letters of the alphabet. And this is also an opportunity to not have everything be perfectly even. You know, if you want to have your letters dance a little bit, you can certainly do that. Okay. So go ahead and work on your quick brown fox. There was one time I was teaching a class of, I think the boys were in middle school at the time, but one of the things I assigned them for homework was to write their own pangram. And after, I'm like, okay, well, if I've asked the boys to write one, I should try it too, right? And it was at that time that I discovered how amazingly brilliant the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog really is, because there's actually very little repetition of letters with this pangram in order to accomplish all the letters of the alphabet. And the other thing is there's lots of, you can type in the word pangrams on the internet. And you can come up with all sorts of things, but you'll also see that the vast majority of them, they're pretty ludicrous. So part of the brilliance of the quick brown fox is that it actually makes sense. So if any of you want a challenge, you can make that an interesting winter challenge. And if you come with a really good one, I'd love it if you shared it with me. All right. So we've written a pangram, and forgive me if you're still working on it. I just need to make sure that we get to all the lowercase alphabet too. But before we get to the lowercase, I want to just talk about, okay, this is great. We're developing some fun lettering, and we're playing with it, maybe making the letters dance a little bit, not necessarily work on a perfectly straight across line. But one of the really fun things to do is to add color to our lettering. And so I'm going to just talk about 4 really simple, easy things that can be done to add color to your modern calligraphy. And one of the things I love to do, especially when I'm learning something, is to add color to this new lettering style that I'm doing. Because when I'm first learning a lettering style, my letters aren't always so impressive. And so I love to add color to my lettering, regardless of experience, but especially as a beginner, the color is a wonderful distraction from things that might not have gone quite the way you wanted them to. So in this case, the design is to just add a streak of color through the letters. And then I took, these are just highlighters. There's nothing fancy about it. I could use just about anything. You know, I could use a colored pencil, or even a pencil will start adding, you know, dimension and interest to a project. And then I created confetti with the second color, you know, highlighter, and allowing it to have a little playful effect to it. The next step is something that was very common in the Book of Kells. So for those who are familiar, the Book of Kells, or not familiar, the Book of Kells is a manuscript from about 800 over in Ireland. So it's an ancient manuscript, and it's just gorgeous. And it's beautifully illuminated and decorated, and it's considered, you know, one of, oh my goodness, how do you even describe the Book of Kells? It's a superlative in so many ways. But one of their main techniques to decorate lettering is to simply take these enclosed areas and add color. So we can do a Book of Kells decorative component where we see the counters and we're adding color to it. Okay, so that's another technique, is to add color inside the counters. A fun, simple technique is to just simply, you know, create a background. In this case, I'm working with a black marker, so I can go right on top of my black lettering, and my black is still so strong that it's going to come right through. But I can literally give it a background. It's almost like the lazy dog laying on the grass, right? Okay, and then one other technique. So the fourth technique is to add a shadow. I tend to be really predictable and always imagine that my light source is coming from my upper left side, which means that my shadow is going to be on my right side and underneath. And there's different ways to do shadows. I can make it nice and thick and make it feel like, okay, it's actually maybe adding a little bit of dimension to the letters. Or I can also, and sometimes on those diagonals, it's hard to figure out, well, where would the shadow go? The nice thing is nobody's evaluating it. Another fun way to do shadow is just to short, quick strokes. And when you do those short, quick strokes, it can end up making the letters feel like they're dancing, like they're actually in motion. Okay, so those are 4 just super simple, quick things that add a lot of vibrancy to our letters as we're playing with them. Okay. All right. Who's ready for the lowercase alphabet? Okay. Hang on, I have my lowercase alphabet where? Bear with me just a second. Hold on. Apparently I got it out and I put it away. So let me just reach into my folder and grab myself that lowercase alphabet. All right, so that's the worksheet we're going to be using next is our lowercase. Okay. Now you'll notice up at the top, it's got a reference, it's got a sampler of the Palmer cursive letters. Okay. The main thing that distinguishes cursive is that the letters are linked. Okay. And this is, you know, a very classic lettering style. This next row, there's no letters at all. But this is the skills that when we take each one skill by skill by skill, when we combine these different skills together, we're actually going to form our letters. So we're first going to just start off with these 5 skills up at the top, okay, before we actually start getting into our lettering. All right. So the first stroke is a connecting stroke. And that was going to be very straightforward. That's our floating stroke, where we are just floating on the paper, nice and light. So we've kind of done that one. We've practiced that one already. Our second skill stroke is where we start with the full pressure. Okay. We're pressing down, and then I'm going to gradually release and have a taper. Okay. When I get to that fin at the bottom, I really like to pick my pen off the paper and then go from the side of my pen to the point of my pen and then come up. Okay, so if I do that a little more real time. Okay. So I'm just going to do that stroke. Okay, and now we have it in the opposite way. So our third skill stroke goes from our connecting stroke, which is a thin, to a taper, to a full pressure. Okay, so here we're going to do a thin, to a taper, to a full pressure. Try that again, a thin, to a taper, to a full pressure. Now, the next stroke is putting those last two skills to, or those three skills together. So we're doing a thin connecting stroke, a taper, a full pressure, very short taper, and then a thin connecting stroke again. Okay, so we're literally putting it all together. And if I get off the screen, please give me a heads up. A thin, a taper, full pressure, taper, no pressure. That's a lot. This is a lot of changes in a very short distance. I would even recommend doing this really large to begin with. So if you want, make that stroke really big. So that way you have room to make all those changes. If we try to do it in too small of a space, we get frustrated, or I can get frustrated, but it's because I'm expecting too much of my muscles before they're ready for it. I haven't developed my muscles haven't developed an understanding as far as what I want of it yet. So I have to be patient. And sometimes I just have to really exaggerate the skill that I'm working on. So that way, again, I'm giving my neurons, I'm giving my brain cells and my muscles a chance to communicate and try to figure out what it is that I'm asking it to do. Okay. So one of my suggestions when I'm teaching calligraphy is that anytime you have trouble with anything, go big, do it larger, because it gives yourself a chance to really understand and see what's happening. All right, so then we have this fifth skill, which is our dot. Okay, so this is a very short pressure stroke right up here. Okay, so this one's just a little bit tricky. So I'm going to float up, and I'm going to do it kind of large here to exaggerate it, make it a little easier to see. But I'm on the tip of my pen. I'm at the top of my dot. I'm going to go around. I'm on the left side. I'm pressing on that pen, and I've already released the pressure by the time I get to the bottom of that dot. And then I come out with a thin, and that'll turn into all sorts of different things. That could be an R, where I do full pressure, a taper, and an exit. I can also turn this thin. I'm at the top of the dot, full pressure, taper, and then I can turn that into an S. The reason why we don't start with the lowercase letters is because we've got all these tapers happening, okay? So we didn't want to start with having to accomplish these tapers in a very small space, okay? We didn't want to have to try to accomplish a lot of detail work in a very small area, okay? So that's why we started with the other letters first, the capital letters first. So you'll notice that this alphabet is also out of order, just like the capitals. But we're doing that again, so that way, when I practice, I'm practicing similar letters together, okay? And that way I don't have to practice 5 I's, because the next letter I'm going to practice, I can do 1 I, and when I practice an L, I'm going to practice the same skills that were on the I. So you don't need to repeat any one letter lots and lots of times. You just need to allow yourself to try a letter, good or bad, move on to the next letter, okay? Because you're going to keep trying those new skills with it. All right, so let's dive in. If you could just stay away from the last row. We'll do the last row separately, but let's try the I through the Z. Okay, and we'll do that for 7 minutes or so, and that takes us to 10 of. And if you do have questions, this is a good time to put those questions into chat to make sure that we get your questions answered.
And please remember to chat to me as the host, Ellen.
Debbie, I had someone have a question about punctuation with calligraphy.
Ah, you know, the beautiful thing is that it's hard to screw up. A lot of it depends on kind of what you want to do for style. You know, like here, just between the dot on this I and the dot on that I, you can tell are a little bit different, right? So I chose to do a chunkier dot here, a more delicate one here. So this one I would have been more up on my tip and just kind of I drew the dot, where here I just did a quick full pressure stroke. And it's really kind of the same thing with your punctuation, is that if you're going for a heavier look, you know, you can do commas that are, you know, took me a little bit before I even got to one I liked. The other thing is that you can do is that because you do have this lovely tip, if you want to make it look very traditional, you can. If you want it to feel more like a brush, you can do that too. So this is one of those lettering styles where I don't want to say anything goes, but a lot goes. There's a lot of room for experimentation on it.
Can you show us how to write 0 to 9?
0 to 9. All right. Let's see here. So the 0 is going to be like your O. And then part of it is normally the way I think of it is that when I'm going up, I have a thin. When I'm going down, I have a thick. So when I write my number 1, I have a thin on the upstroke and a thick on the downstroke. You know, the bottom of the 1 is optional. So the 2, I tend to give it an ear or a hash mark to begin with. A thin taper, something like that. I haven't practiced my numbers, so you're catching me where I'm developing it as I go. You know, you can also just come straight out. The 3, I'm going to start with the full pressure, taper. I'm not sure I like that one. I think I'm going to go thin, taper, thin, taper, and then add a hash mark. 4 is the downstroke, so I'm going to do thick, thin, and then this can be thin, or you can make it a thick stroke. 5, down is thick. Do that taper like on the S with its flag. The left side of the 6 is a downstroke, so I'm going to add pressure and taper it like the O. 7 kind of has a reflection of that 2, where we've got the hash mark. I can come out. And then there's all sorts of ways to do that 7. I can gradually add pressure if I want. The 8, I'm going to take it into 2 miniature zeros, or 2 zeros. I'm not sure I like that. One of the things that's interesting about this question is that I don't use numbers a whole lot for modern calligraphy. As you guys can tell, because I'm playing with design principles as I'm drawing. And one of the things I find with the modern calligraphy is that I use it mostly for headlines. I'm not necessarily using it for an extended amount of text. If I want to do this kind of lettering with, if I'm doing a lot of it, say on envelopes or a project or quotes, I'm more likely to actually use a calligraphy tool, in this case, an oblique pen and a pointed nib, where I'd be working with gouache or ink. Okay, so that was a challenging question. Thank you.
Thanks for going with the flow, Debbie. Somebody else wants to know, is the surface flat or sort of slanted and tilted? I'm not sure if I understand that question. Do you know what they're asking?
I think I do. I am working on a slant board because that is what I'm most familiar with. I'm gonna actually, I don't know. I think I'm gonna tip my camera down and we'll see if you guys can kind of see what's happening at my table. So this is me. And I've actually it's just a simple piece of masonite board and it's being propped up by a little yellow box. Okay. Almost all of my lettering I do at an angle, mostly because I am working with nibs, metal nibs, and so I need to control the flow of my medium. With a marker, it's not as important. The nice thing about working on a slant, though, is that it's helpful on your back and your shoulders, because if I'm working flat on a table, I'm hunkered over and it just puts more back strain on it. So if you can set it up to work on a slant, it can be good for your posture in that respect. Okay. All right. I promised you guys that I was going to get to that last line of lettering, so I don't want to leave you hanging. Hopefully you had a chance to play with the I through the Z. Okay. Now for these round letters at the bottom, okay, you'll notice that I've got the pen pointing upwards, which for the lefties will be pointing down to the lower right corner. Okay. On this, there's 2 ways you can do these round letters. You can do it like our capital C, where we start with a full pressure and then taper it to a no pressure stroke. In this case, so let me show you. So an A that looks like that would be full pressure, taper, no pressure. Sorry. Full pressure, taper, no pressure. Okay. And then if they don't connect, you just simply draw it in. There we go. There, I've got my cursive connection. Another way to do it is where I do it. I don't generally want to push my pens when I'm lettering. But because that little teeny tiny stroke right there, it's so tiny that I can do a little tiny push stroke and then go into my pressure. Okay. Okay, so as you can see, it's going to be challenging to get that smooth transition. And even though I've done it many times, it takes me some warm up before I get it right. Okay. So please extend that patience for yourself as you're learning. The other thing too is that even if you find tonight really hard and challenging, make sure you come back and try it again tomorrow or the next day, because it's really amazing what a good night's sleep will do when you have a new experience. And even if something is challenging, having that period of rest gives your brain and your muscles a chance to communicate and to process what they just experienced. So it's really important to come back, and even if something was really hard, is to give it another try. Okay. So let's spend just a couple minutes going through these curved letters, these round letters on the last line. And then I'm going to just, before we all disappear, I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can use it. Because practice is great, but what really is going to keep you going is projects. Okay. Okay. I'm going to just change my pen angle here, or not my pen angle, my camera angle. All right, I hope you had a chance. I hope you've enjoyed this journey with the marker and lettering this evening. I just wanted to, in the spirit of, no matter how you felt about tonight's class, easy, hard, never want to touch it again. Oh, I'm definitely coming back. I loved it. I want to do more with it. I wanted to share some projects with you. This was a project I got from a calligrapher friend of mine, Margaret Susie, and her lettering, she's a phenomenal artist, lettering artist. And I just want to point out that even though she's using similar tools to what you were using tonight, she's not even playing with tapers. Her strokes are, full pressure strokes combined and overlapped. And then she's added a second color around it.
So even if you struggled with the tapers on your letters, you can still have a lot of fun using your tool, using your marker. Okay, so again, don't be shy. You know, all she's got a brown marker, an orange marker, and a black, very fine line. And yet she made a beautiful little card for me, which, you know, special enough that I've kept, right? But here's an example. We've got Valentine's Day coming up, right? This is just those super, super simple capitals, right? And I've just played with some of the lines on them. You know, I've practiced on the stars, these little stars, just are practicing, you know, taper strokes, you know, creating an explosion with it. So even with those super simple capitals, you can have fun with it. I'm a big fan of adding a little bit of lettering to envelopes. It can just simply be somebody's initials. And then there's actually colored pencil just added to it, you know, where the nooks and crannies are. All right. And then I don't try to do the whole address in modern calligraphy because I do find it tends to be, unless you're really are getting adept with using a small lettering tool, you know, I find even if I just do a name, a first name, a last name, initials, and then I handwrite the rest of it. Even though it's a little bit, it still gets me practicing and gets me going. The more I touch it, the better I get to be with it, right? And the same thing here. We talked about with the quick brown fox, adding decorative components. That's just simply little stars. I'm also a big fan of collage cards. You know, Hallmark's wonderful, it's great. But again, I'm a big fan of giving something that has been handmade, because that's an expression of love, that I care enough about you that I've made something for you. So I keep all sorts of scraps. You know, this was a watercolor that didn't quite, you know, work out the way I thought I wanted it to, but it's become the background on a card. You know, this one is, this texture pattern behind it was, let's see, I think that was a magazine. You know, I've got an old card for the green. I think this was an annual report of a environmental organization and done with some lettering on top. And the beauty of doing cards this way is that if I screw up, I've only screwed up this one part. I haven't screwed up everything. You know, I just take things layer by layer and then I just go from there. So thank you so much. You guys have stuck with me for 90 minutes. I really appreciate that, and I hope you enjoyed the evening. I don't know if it's okay that, you know, people ask questions at the end here or not, if there are any, but it's been a real pleasure to be with all of you tonight. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It was fun. It was challenging because I was doing it right along with you. Feel free to put questions in the chat if anybody has any last minute questions.
Great. And a special thank you to the Newton Library for making this possible and for providing so many of you with these markers for tonight's class. It's a really wonderful gift that the library does for all of you this evening. So thank you to the Newton Library for doing this.
Well, it's really been our pleasure. It was a team effort with myself, Janelle, the maker librarian, and our teen librarian, Megan. So we're glad to be able to bring this. Janelle has lots of maker programs. If you're interested, Janelle, do you want to talk about the one you have coming up next? By putting you on the spot. Oh, I think Janelle is froze. So they were having some trouble with the wireless at the library earlier. What, maybe she'll be able to sort that out. Someone wants to know how they learn more.
Ah, excellent. Thank you so much for asking. One of the links at the top of the chat is the Mass Scribes, the Massachusetts Calligraphy Guild, which is here, which is in, it's primarily based in the Boston area. But they host, they're a great way to connect with other people who are interested in calligraphy. I do offer online in-depth classes for people who would like to learn more about calligraphy. So my website address is listed on your handouts, and you can find out a lot more about what is available there, or sign up for the newsletter, which allows you to stay posted for what is coming up. I do see a question out there. I don't know if AM is still there, but my my hand rests on the paper. Maybe not always my wrist, but this part of my hand usually rests on the paper. I don't know if there was another question out there. Oh, that's good.
Someone asked, I just want to say, someone asked for the links that you suggested, again, the link to the handout and the link to the Mass Calligraphy folks.
Yep.
I will send those out on Tuesday. I'm going to be out of the office after this program until Tuesday morning, but anybody who registered, I will send that off.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And
Oh,
that's
I'll
been...
just put it in the chat, everybody. Thank you, Janelle. You saved me.
Sorry, my internet keeps dropping out. So if I disappear at certain moments, that's why.
Thank you for coming back and rescuing us. That's wonderful. Yeah, so the Mass Scribes is on in the chat. My website's in the chat, and then for the handouts are also in the chat. So thank you.
Any more questions? Well, Debbie, it's really been a pleasure. I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I wish everybody well. Keep drawing, keep making letters.
Absolutely. Keep at it. It only gets easier. I promise.
All right, I'll end the session now. Thanks again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Best to everybody.